Today, we're going to be talking about Welcome to Our Town from Final Fantasy IV. And this piece of music, written by Uematsu, moves very quickly and is not predictable whatsoever. It always moves in a direction you don't expect. And then oh. And then yeah, that's unexpected. Ba 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 da 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 ba. And then back to the beginning. So it's constantly messing with our expectations. And I'm going to go over every single way that it does that. So we begin with this first phrase. Which already contains a lot of really deceptive, weird stuff in it. So jazz people might call this more functional than I see it. Right? They'll treat the 3 chord as kind of like a 1 substitute that moves to 4. But I don't see it that way. I see that when we have a 3 chord that comes after a predominant chord, I mean, such a weird predominant chord for a 3 chord to come after, 2 half diminished 6/5. Odd. Not a typical thing at all. And that 3 then doesn't go to 6. This is what you'd expect. But it doesn't, it goes. Which this kind of wants to go back here. At this point, it doesn't really want to proceed to a dominant yet. And it doesn't do either of those things. But moving backward, we have a 3 moving to 4. That's a deceptive motion. It's a deceptive cadence. So we have this 3 moving to 4, which is a deceptive cadence. And that's important because it's an extra layer of deception that if you were in the tonic 3 camp, like a lot of jazz musicians are, like Shankarian people usually are, even Riemannian people, you might not understand that Uematsu is doing this to be deceptive. It's almost like a reverse Sonic the Hedgehog here, but with a weird 2 half diminished 7. That's a reverse Sonic the Hedgehog, and this is what he turned it into. Which is just bizarre. The Sonic the Hedgehog is about climbing motion, and with the D in the bass over the B half diminished 7 chord, he sort of doesn't even have the climbing motion. So he sabotages this even sounding like a reverse Sonic the Hedgehog anyway, making it seem even more like it's whatever the jazz people think about it as. But then we get more deception here. We go back to 3, but it's not just a normal minor 3. It's half diminished now, which becomes a 2. which then goes to 5 and then resolves to 1. And now we're in B minor. So now we've modulated temporarily to 2. And then from the 2 chord, he's going to go right to minor 4. This double tonicization, 2-5-1 of 2, is not that common. It is the first one on my diagram. You'd be hard pressed to find another 2 half diminished 7-5-1 of 2 in a lot of music in general. A 2 half diminished 7-5-7-1 of 2 begins on an E half diminished chord if the progression happened in the key of C, which, how many times do you use an E half diminished 7 chord in the context of C major? So then we jump right to 4. And then it resolves back to major 1. And then just a normal 2-5-1 in there. This is just a standard old 2-5-1. But then right here, we get a 2-5-1 of flat 3 of the relative key. And this is a very common double tonicization because it brings us to the relative key. So it's a common way to modulate. But in this case, it's just a temporary modulation because right after that, the ending here is very standard. It's a 5 of 5. That resolves to 5. He's going to do this little cadence figure. Which is going to bring us back to the beginning. It's such a surprising chord. It never stays in one place, this piece. Something's always moving you to a place you don't expect. It doesn't even end at the end of the song. It ends with a half cadence, which brings you back to the beginning. Nothing about this song is standard, but it does so in a way that clearly understands the tradition and why everything in the piece is deceptive. And not only that, it works. The amount of variety in every phrase. Everything is fresh. Nothing is going to move to some place that you predict, but it feels inevitable when you hear it in practice. And also everything's reused. It gets reused right here. So what Uematsu is doing is he's repurposing a bunch of things and changing things around, which shows an amazing amount of ingenuity as a composer. I remember there being this old interview and someone asked Uematsu the question, was it difficult to write the Final Fantasy games? And he looked so confused at the question because the way that Uematsu writes is by sitting at the piano and just kind of figuring out some random stuff that he likes the sound of. And then he puts it in the game. It's not that deep. And His ears are very gifted, and he came up with this just because he was playing around. And so Uematsu looks at him and says, difficult. But you could tell on his face, he really wanted to tell the guy, no, it was easy. Because this stuff is in his ear. It's not something that is nebulous intellectual exercises. He just hears this way. He knows that that's weird. And then that sort of is not very functional. And then that isn't what you expected there at all. You expected not to go back to the 3, but he went back to the 3 and altered it as well and turned it into a 2 to go to tonicize the 2 chord. And then he finds himself at 4 by going up a minor third in this weird chromatic median sounding relationship. And then resolves back to major 1, which, why go to 1 right here? Wouldn't that spoil all of the stuff that you've just established? Well, maybe, but Uematsu doesn't seem to care very much because then he does it again. And then right after confirming that we're done, he goes... And then we get the actual cadence. And it's the wrong cadence. We expect an authentic cadence after all of that. But he can't do an authentic cadence because he just did 2 authentic cadences. So now he has to do a half cadence to balance it out. But no theory textbook is going to tell you to end a piece with a half cadence. But Uematsu didn't have a choice here because look at all the green on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th system. He couldn't do an authentic cadence there. It wouldn't work because he spoiled it for himself. But thank God he did. Because now it helps him get back to the beginning. And that's it. I spent a lot of time talking about this piece because I like this one a lot. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time looking at it, just like kind of marveling at the fact that everything is deceptive and nothing moves in the way that it should. And it struck me as very notable when I was younger. It actually doesn't have anything in it that's particularly special or unusual. I guess double tonicizations are kind of cool, but they're not abnormal or unusual for music. They're not crazy real sequences or any special progressions that require special knowledge. Everything's very accessible harmony, except he does something with it that's so exceptional and so extraordinary and so different than what you'd expect, even from his own work. And that's sort of the beauty of Uematsu. He's incredibly versatile. So if this was interesting, join me again in... It's been 2 weeks for the entire length of the show, but I work full time now. And as a result, I'm going to extend the upload schedule to a 3-week schedule, but very often you might get the videos before 3 weeks. So expect 3 weeks, but it's probably going to be earlier than that. Thank you for watching. I have a Discord that's working now. Join the Discord. There's like now a bunch of new people. So if you want to join and talk to more people, everyone's been talking about composition recently. As always, you can look on my Ko-Fi. My charts are up there. I have them in PDF and PNG form now, which is a nice upgrade. I created all the PDFs because I wanted them to print out for my students because I currently teach students at the moment. So good evening and see you in 3-ish weeks.